On a Mississippi plantation in 1840, a slave woman is forced 5 times in one night by the man who owns her. By morning, something in her gaze has changed, and nothing on that land will stay buried for long. At first, it's just a ditch, then a pocket watch, then the stink rising beneath the laundry house floorboards. What they find there turns respect into revulsion, and reveals a justice no court would dare speak aloud. Who really vanished that night, and who made sure no one would forget it? If you would like me to continue creating stories so that this history, which is not taught in schools, is not forgotten, please subscribe to this channel. Write in the comments where you are watching from. The steady drip of water from sodden oak leaves marked time as Lidge made his way along the irrigation trench, his lantern casting weak yellow light across the mud-slicked path. The horse's distressed whinny had pulled him from his cabin, though now the sound came less frequently, more like worried huffs in the darkness ahead. Thunder still growled in the distance, but the worst of the storm had passed, leaving behind that peculiar silence that follows heavy rain. The air hung thick with the scent of wet earth and crushed grass. Lidge's boots squelched with each careful step, the ground threatening to pull them clean off his feet. "Easy now," he murmured, more to himself than any unseen beast. The lantern light caught something metallic in the ditch, perhaps a lost tool, though no one should have been working here after sundown. The horse nickered again, closer this time. As Lidge rounded the bend near the eastern fence line, he found the animal, one of the judge's bay mares, dancing nervously at the edge of the drainage ditch. Her hooves had churned the soft ground into black soup. It wasn't until dawn broke, pale and gray through lingering clouds, that anyone found Reuben. The boy lay face down in the irrigation ditch, one arm twisted beneath him, his clean white shirt now brown with mud. The back of his head was misshapen, cracked like a dropped melon. Dr. Purnell arrived within the hour, his walnut case clutched tight against his chest as he picked his way across the wet ground. He knelt beside the body, spectacles fogging in the morning damp as he made his examination, his pen scratched against his notepad. Cranial trauma consistent with impact from fall or blow. No signs of prolonged struggle. Death likely instantaneous. Sheriff Finley stood at the edge of the scene, thumbs hooked in his belt, watching as field hands lifted Reuben's body from the muck. The boy had been slight for his 17 years, and even soaking wet, he didn't strain the men who carried him. "Found him just like that," Lidge explained, hat in his hands. "No blood trail leading to or from. Must have slipped in the storm." Judge Harlan arrived on horseback, his black coat buttoned tight despite the growing morning heat. "The boy was running an errand," he announced, voice carrying across the yard. "Sent him to fetch rope from the stables during the worst of it. These ditches get treacherous in the rain." The sheriff nodded, pulling out his logbook. The leather was cracked with age, its pages warped from humidity. His pencil moved slowly, deliberately. Fallen weather. No foul play suspected. By mid-morning, the sun had burned away the last of the clouds. Steam rose from the packed earth as slaves moved through their daily tasks, eyes down, voices low. Through the kitchen yard walked Cora, her movements precise and controlled. The white cloth wrapped around her head bore a dark stain near her right temple, stark against the clean fabric. Near the laundry house, she worked methodically, plunging linens into the wash basin. The water rippled red with each movement, though none who passed by dared to look directly or whisper a word about it. In the shadow of the barn, Emmanuel, one of the stable hands, noticed something glinting in the grass. He glanced around before bending to retrieve it. Reuben's brass belt buckle, the one the boy had been so proud of. The metal was clean, unmarked by mud or blood. Emmanuel slipped it into his pocket without a word, knowing well that some things were better left unfound. Morning mist clung to the bottomlands like a burial shroud, thick enough that Judge Harlan's boots left wet prints across the stable floor. The chestnut gelding shifted nervously as he tightened the girth strap, its breath coming in sharp bursts that scattered the fog around its muzzle. "Steady now," the judge murmured, checking the cinch one final time. His ivory-headed walking stick hung from the saddle, its polished surface catching what little light filtered through the morning haze. The pocket watch in his vest showed 5:15, early enough that even the field hands hadn't yet stirred in their cabins. He mounted with practiced ease despite his years, settling into the worn leather saddle. The horses' hooves made soft sucking sounds against the damp earth as they headed north, following the narrow track that wound toward the Cypress Flats. Behind them, the main house slowly disappeared into the fog, its whitewashed walls melting away like a fading daguerreotype. By dusk, worry had replaced the morning's quiet. The chestnut burst from the tree line at full gallop, reins trailing loose and stirrups swinging wild. Its flanks were scored with long scratches, dark blood dried to rust along the leather straps. The horse's eyes rolled white with panic as it thundered into the stable yard, drawing a crowd of anxious onlookers. Luther Harlan arrived from Jackson by nightfall, his carriage wheels throwing mud in their haste. The judge's younger brother wore his authority like armor, directing Sheriff Finley to organize search parties despite the failing light. Lanterns bobbed through the darkness like confused fireflies as men called out across the swamp. "Found something!" The shout came near midnight, drawing everyone to a stretch of boggy ground. Dr. Purnell held the judge's silver pocket watch carefully by its chain, turning it in the lantern light. Dark stains marked the ornate casing. "Blood, surely," Luther insisted, but the doctor adjusted his spectacles with trembling fingers. "Could be organic matter. Swamp rot affects metal peculiarly in this heat." Purnell's voice wavered slightly as he made the suggestion, his eyes not quite meeting the sheriff's. Sheriff Finley directed his deputies to mark the spot, though the rising mosquito swarms and oppressive humidity had most men backing away already. "We'll resume at first light," he announced, mopping his brow with a handkerchief that had long since soaked through. As the search party dispersed, a young field hand named Marcus lingered behind, squinting at something pale caught in the marsh grass. He worked it free carefully, a scrap of cloth, no bigger than his palm. Even in the dim light, the carefully stitched C was visible in one corner. The thread faded to grey, but the needlework still precise. He started to call out, then stopped, remembering the sound of Cora's quiet footsteps in the laundry house each morning. Instead, he tucked the fabric beneath the watch where it lay on Finley's evidence table. The night deepened, bringing with it the chorus of frogs and cicadas. Near midnight, Tom Wheeler, checking the livestock, paused at a strange metallic echo coming from the direction of the laundry house. The sound came again, like iron striking iron, muffled but distinct. When he reported it to Sheriff Finley, the lawman barely looked up from his ledger. "Probably just the pump handle coming loose again," Finley said, turning a page. "Nothing to concern yourself with." The church bells of Grace Baptist tolled hollow and thin across Carrollton's town square that Sunday morning. August heat had settled like a wool blanket over Mississippi, but the usual crowd of fancy parasols and pressed suits was noticeably sparse. Reverend Clay's roomy eyes scanned the half-empty pews, lingering on the front row, where Judge Harlan typically sat ramrod straight, ivory cane propped beside him. "Let us pray," the Reverend intoned, his voice catching slightly. "For those absent from our fellowship today." He pulled the worn leather prayer book closer, fingers trembling as he added, "Judge Percival Harlan, beneath the list of souls requiring divine attention. After service, clusters of parishioners huddled in the shade of live oaks, fans fluttering as they traded theories in hushed voices. Mary Beth Wheeler, who ran the general store, swore she'd heard the judge had gambling debts in Vicksburg. Thomas Reed, the cooper's son, claimed his cousin saw Harlan's horse wearing different tack that morning, suggesting someone else had been riding it. Now, Sheriff Finley interrupted, appearing at the church steps. Let's not get ahead of ourselves with idle speculation. But even as he spoke, boys were pasting fresh notices to the courthouse wall. A reward announcement in the Mississippi Courier, $50 for information about the judge's whereabouts. The serif type looked official, desperate. Monday morning found Finley at his desk, ink-stained fingers shuffling through depositions from the plantation staff. Every account read like a copied lesson. The judge rode north. The horse came back alone. No one saw anything unusual. Even the kitchen maids, usually reliable for gossip, offered nothing but "yes, sir," and "no, sir," in careful cursive. "And where's the Baptiste woman?" Finley asked the overseer, Marcus Whitlow, who shifted his weight from boot to boot. "Cora? Down with blood fever since Wednesday. Dr. Purnell's orders. Complete rest? No visitors." Whitlow's eyes never quite met the sheriff's. "Convenient timing," Finley muttered, but made no move to investigate further. As sunset painted the plantation windows, amber, Eli Troe sat alone in the estate office, surrounded by ledgers and account books. The elderly bookkeeper had served 3 generations of Harlans, his careful columns mapping every transaction, every debt and credit. But tonight, something was wrong. Eli's fingers traced the sewn binding of the judge's personal ledger, finding rough edges where pages had been torn out. The missing sheets corresponded to early May, specifically the 3rd through the 6th. More disturbing was the sudden change in penmanship midway through the remaining entries. Where the judge's bold strokes had dominated for years, a different hand now wrote in deliberate, almost feminine script. The ink was darker too, as if someone had refilled the inkwell with a different batch. The old bookkeeper was still puzzling over this discovery when Martha, the kitchen girl, came to bank the fires for the night. As she cleared the laundry house stove, her poker struck something in the ash drawer. Wrapped in soot-stained cloth was a single page, its edges charred but center still legible. Strange symbols curved across the paper like twisted vines, unlike any writing Eli had seen in his decades of record-keeping. Later, when he showed the page to Reverend Clay, the old preacher's face went ashen. He recognized them from his missionary days, Haitian symbols, marks of vengeance and justice. The August sun hung low and heavy over Bellwether Plantation, casting long shadows across the yard where Cora Baptiste worked the washing. Steam rose from her copper tub as she scrubbed at stubborn stains, her movements mechanical and precise. The right side of her face remained partially closed, the eye socket purpled beneath like an overripe plum. Dr. Aloysius Purnell observed her from his office window, medical journal open on his desk. His pen scratched quietly across the page. August 14th, 1840. Subject exhibits continued facial edema, right orbital socket. Pattern consistent with repeated blunt trauma. Previous injuries incompletely healed. He paused, adjusting his spectacles, then added in smaller script, similar presentations noted in May, June. The doctor closed the leather-bound volume and slipped it into his desk drawer, turning the key twice. Across town, in the whitewashed meeting room of Grace Baptist Church, the council gathered around a scarred oak table. Reverend Clay's arthritis-twisted fingers traced down the fall manumission list, passing over Cora's name, though it had been promised in the spring ledger. Judge Harlan's signature lay beneath that pledge, but with him missing, the council deemed it inadvisable to proceed. The New Circuit preacher, Reverend Elias Yarrow, sat quietly in the corner, his silver beard catching the late afternoon light. He had arrived just weeks ago, replacing aging Reverend Clay, and his keen eyes missed little. During Sunday services, he'd watched Cora in her back row seat, noting how she neither swayed nor sang during the hymns. Later that evening, in his boarding house room, Yarrow penned a letter to his seminary colleague in St. Louis. There is one among the congregation, a house slave named Cora, whose demeanor strikes me particularly. She bears herself with an unnatural stillness, as if she's done with weeping. Her face shows recent violence, yet she meets every gaze directly, without shame or fear. It is not the look of one broken, but of one who has made some terrible peace. The moon rose full over the plantation as night settled in. In the cramped quarters behind the kitchen, Mary Ellen, one of the younger maids, lay awake on her pallet. Through the thin wall, she could hear Cora muttering in her sleep. The words were strange, Creole French that Mary Ellen barely understood from her childhood in New Orleans, but one phrase repeated, clear and cold as creek water. Je le mets dans la terre. I put him in the earth. Mary Ellen pulled her blanket tighter, trying to block out the sound. But something else caught her attention, a sickly sweet odor seeping up through the floorboards of the adjacent laundry house. The summer rains had been heavy, and the wood was beginning to rot. Beneath one corner, where an iron shackle anchored the board to the foundation, the smell grew stronger with each passing day. The girl pressed her face into her pillow, pretending not to notice how the stench reminded her of the time a possum had died under the kitchen steps. By morning, she would convince herself she'd dreamed both the words and the smell. But for now, she lay rigid in the dark, listening to Cora's voice wind through the night like smoke. The late summer heat pressed down on Sheriff Finley's office like a wet wool blanket. He sat behind his desk, half-heartedly fanning himself with yesterday's copy of the Mississippi Courier, while a dust-covered peddler shifted from foot to foot before him. "I'm telling you, Sheriff, plain as day I saw her," the peddler insisted, twisting his hat brim. Tall woman, dark as coffee, wearing this white cloth round her head. Bought enough lime to fill 2 sacks at Greenwood's general store. Paid in silver, too. Finley set down his paper, regarding the man with practiced disinterest. Lot of women wear head wraps in August heat. Lot of folks need lime for their gardens. But she had this look about her. "That'll do," Finley cut him off, reaching for his logbook. He made a show of writing something down, though his pen never touched the page. "We'll keep an eye out." After the peddler left, Finley stared at the empty doorway. The mention of a white head wrap had stirred something in his memory, a detail from one of Dr. Purnell's reports about the Baptiste woman. But before he could chase down the thought, Luther Harlan's buggy rattled to a stop outside. Luther swept in, his black coat immaculate, despite the dusty road from Jackson. Unlike his missing cousin Percival, Luther carried himself with the easy confidence of inherited wealth rather than earned authority. "Everything in order, Sheriff?" Luther's voice was honey smooth, nothing like the judge's sharp commands. "Yes, sir. Papers came through this morning. The estate's yours to manage." Luther nodded, producing a folded document. "Good. I'm restructuring the operation, moving most hands to the river parcels. Better soil there anyway. Though we'll keep Baptiste at the main house. For continuity." Finley's pen scratched across paper, recording the transfer. He didn't look up when Eli Trow appeared in the doorway, clutching his leather ledger like a shield. "Begging pardon," the bookkeeper said, his voice thin. "I've come to tender my resignation." Luther barely glanced at him. "As you wish. Leave the accounts with my clerk." Of course. Eli placed a neat stack of papers on the corner of Finley's desk. "Everything's in order, though you might want to review the May entries. Some inconsistencies there." That evening, after his hands had stopped shaking, Eli sat at his boarding-house desk and composed a careful letter to the Circuit Court Registrar in Jackson. "Dear Sir, I write with grave concern regarding certain records kept at Bellwether Plantation. The punishment ledger, in particular, contains entries that warrant immediate review." Rain began to fall as he sealed the envelope, fat drops hammering the tin roof. At the plantation, water seeped through soil and wood, turning the ground beneath the laundry house to mud. A trap door, hidden beneath stacked linens, creaked as its supporting beams softened. In the growing dark, black flies gathered in the corners, their buzzing barely audible above the storm. In his office in Jackson, the court registrar's clerk made a neat entry in his scheduling book. "Thursday next. Bellwether inspection. Full accounting required." The flood came without warning. Water rushed down from the northern hills, turning the Yazoo River from a slow-moving channel into a churning mass of debris and mud. By noon, the river had breached its sore banks, sending torrents across the fallow cotton fields of Bellwether Plantation. Samuel Clay, the preacher's boy, splashed through ankle-deep water toward the abandoned laundry house. Rain pelted his face as he sought higher ground. The old building stood on brick footings, its weathered walls offering promise of shelter from the storm. He pushed open the warped door, wood creaking beneath his feet. The air inside hung thick with mold and something else, a sweetness that made his throat tighten. Samuel took 3 steps forward, testing each board. On the 4th step, the floor gave way with a sharp crack. He fell only a few feet, landing hard on his side. Above him, rain poured through the jagged hole. As he scrambled to his feet, his hand brushed something metal in the mud. A chain bolted to newly exposed brickwork. "Help!" he shouted. "Someone help!" Within an hour, Sheriff Finley stood at the edge of the collapsed floor, holding a lantern over the opening. 2 deputies had begun clearing debris, revealing a sealed chamber beneath the laundry house. The bricks were mortared recently, within the past year, Dr. Purnell noted as he crouched nearby. "Break through here," Finley ordered, pointing to a section of wall. The bricks came away easily, softened by floodwater. Behind them lay a root cellar, about 8 feet square. The lantern light caught glints of metal. 2 sets of manacles bolted to the far wall, their chains dark with rust. A razor lay in one corner, its blade caked with brown residue. Scraps of silk, once part of a cravat, floated in the shallow water. And there, half buried in mud and ash, lay what remained of Judge Percival Harlan. Dr. Purnell worked methodically, documenting each detail in his leather-bound notebook. The body lay face down, hands bound behind with hemp rope. The jaw hung at an unnatural angle, clearly broken before death. But it was the marking on the corpse's chest that drew everyone's attention, a symbol carved deep into the sternum, its lines precise and deliberate. Reverend Yarrow arrived as they were lifting the body. He took one look at the marking and stepped back, crossing himself. "That's no random scarification," he said, quietly to the circuit judge who had been summoned from Greenwood. "That's a vive, a Vodou symbol. It means divine justice." Dr. Purnell pulled the judge aside, speaking in low tones. "The marking was made post-mortem, Your Honor. Whoever did this wanted to send a message, not perform a ritual." As the rain continued to fall, Sheriff Finley discovered a glass jar wedged behind a loose brick. Inside, sealed with beeswax, lay a bundle of papers, torn from the plantation's punishment ledger. Some entries were written in a careful, feminine hand. the ink different from the judge's usual brown. But 4 pages were conspicuously absent, those covering the first week of May, 1840. Finlay unfurled a notice sheet, still damp from the printer's press. At the top, in bold letters, "Wanted. Woman formerly known as Cora Baptiste, age 20, dark complexion, one clouded eye, may be wearing white head wrap, for questioning in matter of murder. $100 reward." The Vicksburg jail squatted like a brick oven in the June heat. Inside, Matron Sarah Whitmore dabbed sweat from her neck as she recorded the day's new arrivals. Her pen scratched across the ledger. June 2nd, 1841. Female prisoner, assault charge, River District. The woman sat perfectly still on the wooden bench, hands folded in her lap. Despite the heat, she wore a long-sleeved dress of faded blue cotton. Her right leg extended slightly, betraying a subtle stiffness. When asked her name, she replied, "Anna Marie," in an accent that moved between French and Mississippi drawl, never quite settling on either. "Previous employment?" Matron Whitmore asked, not looking up from her paperwork. "Cook, river steamer Magnolia Queen." The woman's voice was soft but precise. The charge seemed straightforward enough. She'd struck a freedwoman near the cotton exchange, though witnesses disagreed on who started the altercation. But something about her demeanor made the matron pause. Most prisoners fidgeted, pleaded, or grew belligerent. This one simply watched, her left eye sharp and dark, her right partially closed, as if permanently bruised. Reverend Thomas Blackwood arrived that afternoon to perform his weekly jail ministry. He moved down the row of cells, offering prayer and small comforts. When he reached the woman called Anna Marie, she raised her hand to accept a tract, and gold glinted on her finger. The preacher froze. "That ring," he said. "Where did you come by it?" It was a man's signet ring, too large for her slender hand. Tarnish filled its engravings, but beneath the patina, 2 letters remained visible. P.H. "It was a gift," she said, drawing her hand back into the shadows of the cell. Reverend Blackwood hurried to the sheriff's office. Within an hour, they had located the notice in the Mississippi Courier's back issues. The description matched. Tall, broad-shouldered, one eye damaged, educated speech. The ring confirmed it. This was Cora Baptiste, wanted for questioning in Judge Harlan's murder. When confronted, she offered no denial. No explanation for the ring. No account of her whereabouts since the previous August. She sat in perfect stillness as Judge Denton read the detention order, authorizing her transfer to Carrollton for further questioning. "You understand the gravity of these charges?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor." Her voice carried no emotion. As the guards prepared for transport the next morning, she began to hum, a low, melodic sound that filled the cell block. Matron Whitmore recognized it as an old Creole lullaby, the kind sung at wakes and gravesides. The tune wove between the bars, making the other prisoners fall silent. A tear rolled down her left cheek, but her damaged right eye remained dry. In Jackson, a clerk discovered church records from Grace Baptist dated 1839. Among the papers was a manumission pledge signed by Judge Harlan, promising freedom to 3 house slaves after 1 year's faithful service. 2 names were crossed out, marked "Sold West." Only one remained unaltered: Cora Baptiste. The document bore a single addition in the margin, written in the judge's hand: "Service incomplete. Promise void." Candles flickered in iron holders along the courthouse walls, casting wavering shadows across the wood-paneled chamber. Outside, cicadas droned in the July heat as Circuit Judge Denton adjusted his spectacles and called the inquiry to order. The gallery benches creaked under the weight of Carroll County's most prominent citizens, all straining to glimpse the woman in iron shackles. Cora Baptiste stood unnaturally still, her white head wrap starched and clean despite weeks in the Vicksburg jail. Her damaged right eye remained half closed, while her left surveyed the room with unwavering attention. Dr. Purnell approached the bench first, medical ledger clutched in trembling hands. His testimony came in careful, measured words. "I documented extensive bruising and lacerations on May 4th, 1840, he said, fingers tracing the ink-filled pages. The pattern and placement indicated— he paused, glancing at the ladies present— indicated repeated violation of an intimate nature. The doctor produced a sealed letter, written the morning after his examination. I regret my silence then, but Judge Harlan controlled the county purse, and my position depended on his goodwill. Next came Mary Beth Clayton, the parish clerk. She spread documents across the judge's desk, recovered ledger pages, church correspondence, and letters written in Cora's distinctive hand. The writing matches, she declared, pointing to identical loops and slants. These entries in the judge's punishment ledger, they're hers. She copied his records, adding her own observations in the margins. Reverend Yarrow stepped forward, a worn Bible in his hands. The symbol carved into the judge's flesh was no random marking, he testified. I consulted with a Jesuit scholar in New Orleans. It represents divine retribution, justice claimed before God when earthly courts fail. The evidence mounted as afternoon shadows lengthened. The church tithe logs revealed the signet ring's provenance, a Harlan family heirloom dating to Virginia, meant to pass to the judge's son who died in infancy. Its presence on Cora's finger spoke volumes. Throughout the proceedings, Cora remained motionless, her face betraying nothing. Only when Judge Denton asked if she wished to speak did she stir. He wrote it all down, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hushed courtroom. Every time. The gallery erupted in whispers. Judge Denton struck his gavel 3 times before silence returned. Having weighed the evidence before this court, he intoned, I find the accused guilty of the murder of Judge Percival Harlan. He paused, studying Cora's impassive face. However, given the circumstances revealed here today, I cannot in good conscience impose the death penalty. The judge's quill scratched across parchment. The prisoner will serve life at hard labor, beginning next week in Natchez. As guards led Cora from the courthouse, an elderly woman in black pushed through the crowd. She threw white lilies at Cora's feet, their petals scattering across the wooden steps. In the sheriff's office, a clerk prepared transport documents, listing prisoners for the journey south. He scratched out one name beside Cora's, the second convict assigned to share her shackles. The ink smeared, making the name illegible. Thunder cracked overhead as the prison cart lurched through the mud near Claiborne Creek. Rain pelted the canvas cover, turning the dirt road into a treacherous slope. 2 guards huddled at the front, shoulders hunched against the deluge, while 7 prisoners sat chained in the wagon bed. The wheels hit a washout, wood splintered, and the cart pitched sideways. Horses screamed, bodies tumbled. The crash echoed through the storm-dark woods. Hours later, as dawn broke grey and sullen, Sheriff Finley surveyed the wreckage. The creek had risen 6 feet in the night, its waters now chocolate brown and churning. 2 prisoners had been found alive, clinging to a fallen oak downstream. Of the others, including Cora Baptiste, there was no sign. Here, sir. A deputy held up a length of iron chain, its lock sprung open. Found these shackles caught on a root. They're marked with her number. Finlay turned the manacles over in his hands. The mechanism showed no signs of forcing, as if they'd simply fallen open in the chaos. He said nothing, but his jaw tightened as he pocketed them. The search lasted 3 days. They dragged the creek, combed the banks, questioned every farmer and traveler for miles. But the flood had scoured the land clean. Whatever traces Cora might have left were swept away in the muddy torrent. A week later, Joshua Freeman, a freedman who ran the ferry crossing near Natchez, came forward with a strange tale. He'd seen a woman matching Cora's description. White head wrap, pronounced limp, board a fishing barge headed downriver. She'd carried papers marking her as a cook's helper. But when authorities checked the manifests of every vessel that had passed, no such passenger was recorded. In late August, Reverend Yarrow sent his final correspondence on the matter to the circuit court. A single line, written in his precise hand, "Even the earth gave her back." He left his parish that autumn, bound for a mission in Texas. The Bellwether plantation met its end in October. Lightning struck the main house during a dry spell, and the flames spread quickly. By morning, only chimneys remained standing. The laundry house, where Judge Harlan's body had lain hidden for so long, burned to its foundation stones. Decades passed. The story of Cora Baptiste faded into whispered legend. Then, in 1867, an elderly tavern keeper in Mobile made a curious discovery while renovating his kitchen. Behind a loose brick in the hearth, he found a page torn from a Bible. The verse, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord," had been underlined in what appeared to be dried blood. The man recalled a quiet woman who'd cooked there briefly in the late 1840s. She'd walked with a limp and kept to herself. But perhaps the greatest mystery lay in what was never found: the 4 missing pages from Judge Harlan's punishment ledger. Rumors persisted that these sheets contained not the names of slaves, as assumed, but rather a list of the judge's frequent guests, men of standing who'd shared in his cruelties. These pages vanished with Cora, their secrets carried away like leaves in the flood waters of Claiborne Creek.